The Great Fire of London in 1666 remains one of the most famous catastrophes in British history. In just a few days, the flames reduced most of the city to ashes, claiming lives, livelihoods, and iconic structures. Historians have largely recorded it as an unfortunate accident sparked by a bakery on Pudding Lane. However, some wonder if the story might be too simple. Could the Great Fire have been something more than an accidental blaze? Let's dive into this mystery, exploring the historical context and examining real-life examples that suggest accidents may not always be as straightforward as they seem. The early hours of a catastrophe. On the night of September 2nd, 1666, Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane became the unlikely starting point of a disaster. The details are chillingly simple. Farriner, a well-known baker, likely failed to extinguish one of his bakery's ovens. A stray ember smoldered quietly, eventually sparking a blaze that would engulf the bakery and later, most of London. What began as an unfortunate accident quickly evolved into an uncontrollable inferno as flames leapt from building to building, spreading to nearly 80% of the city. The conditions that night only fed the disaster. London's medieval buildings, primarily constructed of timber and topped with thatch roofs, were perfect fuel for fire. And after a long, dry summer, they were exceptionally vulnerable. Adding to the problem was a strong wind from the east, which helped spread the flames rapidly, overwhelming the residents and firefighting efforts. Was it really an accident? While it may seem obvious to chalk the Great Fire up as an accident, several aspects of the incident have raised suspicions. First, Londoners were already on edge in 1666. Just a year before, the city had suffered the devastating Great Plague, which killed thousands. Many Londoners saw the fire as a continuation of divine wrath or as an omen. Furthermore, London in the 1660s was rife with tension. Political, religious, and social unrest were rampant. Many people from the lower classes resented the wealth and power of the elite. Foreigners, particularly the French and Dutch, were often the targets of suspicion, as England was at war with both countries during that period. Rumors quickly circulated that the fire had been deliberately set by French or Dutch spies as an act of war or sabotage. Some Londoners even claimed to have seen foreigners lighting fires in various parts of the city. Though these reports were later dismissed as hysteria, they show how easily suspicions could be stoked in an anxious society. The role of human error and neglect. Even if the Great Fire was not an intentional act of sabotage, human error and negligence certainly played a significant role. Fire prevention was lax. Firefighting resources were insufficient, and there was little to no regulation around building materials, despite previous fires. Just 35 years earlier, in 1633, another fire had destroyed a large portion of the city. At that time, city officials had pledged to implement new building regulations, yet little had changed by 1666. These oversights illustrate how complacency and negligence can create the perfect conditions for disaster. Much like modern accidents, such as oil spills or industrial accidents where human oversight, cost-cutting, or ignorance paved the way for calamity, the Great Fire could be seen as a tragedy waiting to happen. The London of 1666 was a tinderbox, both physically and metaphorically, just waiting for a spark. Real-life parallels. Lessons from modern disasters. The Great Fire reminds us that even small mistakes can have catastrophic consequences when left unaddressed. In modern times, we see similar examples, such as the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, which was caused by a combination of human error, inadequate safety protocols, and poor communication. The engineers and scientists did not intend to unleash radioactive disaster upon thousands of people, but their disregard for protocol and complacency around safety procedures led to one of history's worst nuclear accidents. Another example is the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill, where a preventable mechanical failure and a series of risky decisions led to a spill that caused immeasurable environmental damage. Again, no one intended to cause an oil disaster, but a failure to prioritize safety and caution made the accident inevitable. These cases, much like the Great Fire of London, remind us that accidents are rarely purely accidental. Often, they result from a complex web of errors, misunderstandings, and ignored warnings. This understanding calls us to be vigilant, recognizing the importance of responsibility, preparedness, and humility, an inspiring rebirth from the ashes. Despite the devastating effects of the Great Fire, London rose from its ashes stronger than ever. Rather than rebuilding the city exactly as it was, Londoners saw this as an opportunity to build better. Influential architects like Sir Christopher Wren reimagined the city skyline, replacing wooden structures with stone and brick buildings. The new St. Paul's Cathedral became a symbol of resilience and renewal, reminding Londoners and visitors alike that from disaster, beauty and strength can emerge. The rebuilding effort was massive and unprecedented, but it demonstrated the power of collective will and innovation. Laws were introduced to ensure better building standards and fire prevention, creating a safer city for future generations. In the centuries that followed, London would face other challenges, but the spirit of resilience forged during its recovery from the Great Fire remains an inspiration. The legacy of the Great Fire. The Great Fire of London is a story that prompts reflection. While most historians agree it was an accident, it's evident that multiple factors converged to make it a tragedy of immense proportions. The underlying lesson is clear. Negligence, ignorance, and societal tensions are potent fuels for disaster. By learning from these mistakes, we can foster a culture of preparedness and accountability in our own lives and societies. So, was the Great Fire of London really an accident? In the simplest terms, yes. But it was also a disaster born of circumstances and errors that were preventable. The legacy of the fire serves as a reminder that out of the ashes of hardship, we have the power to rebuild, to improve, and to move forward with a deeper understanding of the consequences of our actions.